Hello, everyone, and good morning. Welcome to our Renton Laserfiche online user group. See, we still have a few people logging in, so let's just give ourselves a minute just to get everyone prepped and logged on. Okay, all right, let's get started. Well, hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to our Laserfiche online user group hosted by Cities Digital and the City of Renton. My name is Julio. I am the marketing coordinator for CDI, and I'll be today's MC for today's session. So let's start off with a few slides. I want to start off by saying thank you to Teresa Phelan and Megan Greger. Teresa's from the City of Renton, and Megan's from the City of Burien. They're very helpful in helping us organize this event, and it's always great when we get a chance to meet up with other fellow Laserfiche users, talk about all the great possibilities and the great potential that Laserfiche has to offer for organizations. Quick overview of our agenda. Once I am done with my welcome introductions, I'll pass it over to Ron Race from Cities Digital, and he will be presenting to us covering the topic of capture tools, highlighting quick fields and QR codes. And then at 9:45, Ron Race will continue with his presentation covering a new topic, workflow and Laserfiche forms. And that presentation will lead us all the way to our 10-minute break at 10:45. Once we regroup, we will be joined by Kyle Nebel from Cities Digital, and he will be presenting on records management. And that presentation will take us all the way to the end of our user group, where I will wrap up the meeting and cover the survey and provide some useful resources at the end of our presentation. But before we get started, just want to go over some quick housekeeping items. The image you see here on the right is what you should be seeing on your screen as an attendee on your right side of your screen. For today's purposes, all participants, all attendees will be muted. This is primarily to avoid any possible interruptions, such as dog barking in the background or your phone going off, things like that. But that does not mean that you cannot ask a question. Please, by any means, at any point of one of the presentations or today's user group, submit a question in our question box here. And we have about a couple people, I believe, monitoring these questions. So during a presentation, if the presenter can address what you want to ask, we should have someone that's monitoring the questions and should be able to provide you an answer during one of our presentations. Also, if you, at the end of today's user group video, you have a slide or you want a screenshot of one of our presentations or something that was on this video, please, by all means, send a request to us. We'll be more than happy to send you a screenshot or a slide of one of the presentations today. And also, this user group will be recorded too. So give it about a day or two after today's session. We should have a link available to all attendees of the recorded version of this session, and we'll send it to you directly by email. And before we kick off the first presentation, just want to do a quick introduction. I want to start off with Teresa from the City of Renton. Do you want to say hello or anything, Teresa?
Yes, I do. Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Phelan, and I'm with the City of Renton, and I plan the Renton user group meetings. And I'm really excited to see everybody attending this user group. And I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for taking the time to attend. We have a lot of new people attending today, as well as people that have attended past meetings. So I'm really excited to see us growing. And if you have any comments about the user group meeting or any agenda item suggestions, please send me an email and I'll put my email address in the chat box. And I would like to also thank Megan Greger for all her help in these user group meetings. She was at the City of Renton where she helped me, and now that she's moved to Burien, she's still helping me. So thanks, Megan. I appreciate all your help. And thanks to CDI that we're able to hold these meetings online. And I hope you'll find it informative and very useful.
Right on. Megan, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Thank you, Teresa. I am happy to be here today, and I'm seeing a bunch of really familiar names for people I worked with in Renton, people I work with now in Burien, and also just other people that I've worked with throughout the almost 10 years that I've been in this clerk field. And so I just want to welcome everyone, and I'm going to be helping to moderate the questions today. So I just wanted to give a little update on how we will handle that. Teresa and I, as well as the CDI group here today, are all in agreement that the best time to get questions answered is as they come up. So when we see your questions, if it's not something that Michael from CDI or I can answer, then we will just chime right in and ask the question of the presenter. So feel free to just shoot those questions in. We will make sure to get those answered for you. Otherwise, thank you all for being here, and I can also put my email in the chat as well, or Teresa, if you want, or I can do it. I can put my email in the chat as well, so if you ever feel like you need a resource or have any questions, I'm here and happy to talk Laserfiche to anyone who needs it. And that's all.
Perfect. Thank you, Megan. And from City Digital team, we also have, as an organizer, myself, Julio, marketing coordinator. I've been at CDI for almost a year now, and excited. This is my first user group that I'll be attending, and also my first one I'll be hosting or emceeing. So it's exciting for me. And we also have joining us Ron Race. Want to say hello, Ron?
Good morning, everyone. As you said, my name is Ron Race. I am a senior business process consultant for CDI, and I have been with the company for 10 plus years. So I have a bit of experience building solutions for our clients. So thanks for joining.
Perfect. And we also have Michael Mathis as well. Want to say hello, Michael?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Mathis. I am the Client Services Director here at CDI. I have been with the company for about 15 years now, working in both the development department and the consulting department as the director. I have been working quite intensively with Laserfiche for 15 years, so I know quite a bit about quite a lot, so feel free to ask any questions.
And of course, thank you, Michael. And of course, last but not least, we have Kyle Niebel with us as well. Want to say hello, Kyle?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me, and welcome to our session. Being a longtime Laserfiche user as well, I've been with CDI since, 9+ years myself. And actually, I go back with Laserfiche before that as well. So I'm looking forward to being able to pass on my knowledge of the product here today. And I'm so glad to see so many familiar names. And hopefully you'll remember me. If you haven't met me before, you'll probably meet me in the very near future. And hello, everyone. Looking forward to today's session. So yeah, thanks so much, Julio.
Excellent. All right, now we got the welcome slides done, introductions done. We can get started with the presentations. And first one to kick it off for us will be Ron. Ron, are you ready to present so I can pass on the screen share to you?
I think I'm good.
All right, perfect. Pass it on over to you now.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, Julio. Appreciate it. So just, I'll go ahead and get started here. My first section, we're going to be going over some capture tools that Laserfiche has available. I am kind of focusing on two of them. That those are Import Agent and quick fields. And the reason we're kind of focusing on this is we've had people asking, what is the best way to kind of do a mass import into Laserfiche? And I think that these are the two capture tools that facilitate this the best. All right. So import agent, a couple of pros and cons. One of the big pros with import agent is the cost. It is a very inexpensive Laserfiche add-on. It is not included with Rio or Avante, but it is, as I say, something that can be added on for a very low cost. In addition to that, import agent is also very simple to configure. It's literally used to essentially point at a Windows folder, and you tell it to grab everything in that folder and pull it into Laserfiche, and that's for the most part it. There's a few other things that you can do there, but we like the simplicity of it. One of the nice things about import agent is it does have the ability to capture some Windows metadata. So one of the biggest questions or issues that tend to come up when we are performing a large conversion or import project for clients is, how do I retain the fact that this document was created, 5 years ago, 7 years ago? So if you just drag documents into Laserfiche, generally speaking, that isn't something that can be captured. So Laserfiche does have its built-in created and modification dates, and those are items that can't be changed, but we are able to capture these values and then put them into some additional fields, and I'll be showing that here later. As far as any cons when it comes to import agent, really the biggest one is that you are limited on what type of metadata that you are able to capture. There are certain ways to capture information that are more tricks, so to speak. But the biggest things that you're able to capture when using import agent would be all related to what folder it's in at the time that it's imported. Obviously, the file name is captured. Again, we can capture that Windows creation or modification dates, but it's not going to be smart enough to know if this is an invoice or if this is an I-9 document or anything like that. So there is going to be generally some user interface to get everything where it needs to go. All right, so quick fields. Quick fields is a great capture product. It's been around forever, and it is a very powerful tool. As far as the pros and cons for quick fields and kind of the best use case for quick fields is quick fields is excellent at capturing what we like to call a structured document. So if you are importing a lot of the same types of documents at once, it is very good at being able to be programmed to identify those and know where to break those different documents apart. A lot of advanced abilities built into quick fields. Some examples here. We are able to capture metadata from barcodes, QR codes, specific zone OCR. Hopefully you all are familiar with OCR. Stands for optical character recognition, and is basically the ability to use that text in certain areas to make decisions and to pull or capture metadata. We can also use just generic text extraction, which is similar to Zone OCR, but generally is looking at the entire page to try to determine certain information. A little trickier there. And then, of course, we can also introduce database lookups into our quick field sessions to be able to pull back additional information and apply that to the documents.
Ron, excuse me, we have a couple people that said they lost audio.
Oh no. Oh no. Can is it just me or?
I could hear you.
Yeah, I could hear
Okay.
as well, and we're getting some people saying that they're fine with it. So
Okay.
Yeah.
So it might be some issues on the attendees side there. All right.
If they refresh their page, will that help?
They could either refresh the page, or worst case scenario, they might have to drop off and rejoin. The other thing that they can do is if they click in the, I believe that they have an audio tab in the GoToWebinar. If you are called in on a phone, you could switch it to computer audio and then switch it back to the phone call and call back in. Or if you're having issues with the computer audio, you could, kind of do the reverse of that. You could switch it to phone call and call in on the phone. Sometimes that will help with the audio issues.
And, it looks like the two people who lost audio are at the same place. They're at the same location. So it could be something with, and they're both on the phone. So it's possible that was why too.
Okay.
Yeah, and if they do miss a part in this presentation, it will be recorded, so they'll be able to rewind and rewatch this section.
And they say they're back now, so that's good.
Okay, perfect. All right, continuing on here. So back to quick fields, another pro similar to import agent, we also have the ability to capture that Windows metadata, specifically the creation and last modified dates. So I know that one thing that has come up with a couple of our clients during projects is, they want to be able to capture who last edited the documents in Windows, and that is unfortunately something that we're not able to capture. We have a couple of tricks that we can do to, try to capture that, but it usually falls under, doing some searches in Windows and, then sorting by that author or created, the person who created it, and put them all into a folder, and then we can capture that data off of the folder name. But just kind of let you know that we are limited as to what Windows allows us to capture. All right. So I put this in here. This is actually, I should have also put this in import agent as well. So the great thing about these tools is the ability to automate this capture process. So with import agent, the great thing is import agent is, set up, it's monitoring this folder. Anything that gets put into that folder is captured. It's, it's just going to grab that and pull it in. So it will, do that all automatically. With quick fields, it's a little trickier. There is an additional, like I say, the add-ons that that quick fields has, and one of those is called quick fields agent. You can set that up to automate the ability to run quick fields. All right, now as far as cons to quick fields, the big one is cost. Quick fields is it's very modular. Lots of different add-ons. The basic quick fields is actually fairly affordable. But as soon as you start adding our, the ability to read the barcodes, the ability to use Zone OCR, and then of course, the ability to automate that capture process with Quick Fields Agent. Those can really become an issue in regards to the total cost. So again, that kind of have to weigh the pros and cons of the cost versus the time savings, and see if it's something that you're going to use a lot long term. If you have any questions on the cost of either of these tools, definitely reach out to your Laserfiche VAR or reseller. I guess we're called something else nowadays, solution providers. There we go. So you'll just want to reach out to those people. All right, now hopefully to a little bit more interesting, fun stuff. We're going to do a couple of demos, kind of show you how I set them up, what they're doing, and then we'll be able to show you all about it. So I'm going to start with a demo of Import Agent, and then I'm going to move into the demo of Quick Fields, and then we will move on. So just one moment, let me end my slideshow here and switch over. All right. So I'm going to start by just showing what I configured with our Import Agent. Okay, so Import Agent, as I said, is actually very basic. We essentially, as I said, we point to a monitored folder. That is generally either a local Windows folder, or it can be a network drive. The network drives can get a little tricky just because of the way that Windows hides things, but you can get that set up. You just need the fully qualified URL or IRL there. Then in our properties page, pretty basic again, we set up the login into Laserfiche, how we want to name those files. Generally, I just keep the same original file name. Where are we going to put those files into Laserfiche? And then we go to our fields. And again, there are a lot of things that you can set, but generally you're going to find if you try to say, fill out this entire template, you're just not going to have the information available to really get that figured out. But you can set, different templates on all the documents coming in, and then you can set individual fields here. So you'll notice I created two fields: original creation date and the original last modified date. So we can use that to capture that data as it comes in. A couple other things: you can apply tags to documents imported by Import Agent. You can also set this to a schedule. Now, as I said before, generally, if this is set to continuously, it will just automatically monitor that folder, forever until you turn that off. Couple of things in regards to processing options. What this generally means is, do you want your documents OCR'd when they come into the system? If there are PDF files, do you want to convert those files into TIFF images or leave them as the PDF? And then the last two, post-processing is just what do we want to do with those original files in Windows? If it's a long-term process that you have had set up and works really well, I would actually recommend you tell it to delete those original files, because otherwise you're just duplicating, all that storage space. Generally, early on in the testing phase, I'll move it into a process folder just to make it easier to move things back and forth. And then document handling, these are the same options that you have anytime you are adding a file into Laserfiche. So I generally will leave those as the defaults. All right. So I know I kind of went through that fast, but it's kind of boring stuff. I just wanted to kind of point that out to you. So let's take a quick look. So our documents, I have 10 documents here in my process folder. Just move them back over. And hopefully we should see those start getting picked up here. And I do apologize, I'm on a slow VM, so let me double check there they go. Okay, so that is now grabbing those files. It is importing them into my incoming scans area. You can see that these are being converted. They are not PDF files. And if I open these up, we see our documents come in. And then over here, you can see that the original creation date, in this case, was 11/2, and the last modified date was 10/27. So that's one of those weird things where the document was modified here, and then I copied it. And so it was created on a later date than its modified date. And the reason why this is, taking a little while is because I told it to convert those files from PDF into TIFF, and that does take a little bit of processing power on the part of the server here. And again, it's a little underpowered. But as you can see, import agent does a good job of grabbing those documents, pulling them in, capturing that basic Windows metadata. The big shortcoming here would be, in order for me to file these documents, I would have to open these documents up, look at them, and apply the appropriate template and field values. All right. So I can close.
Ron, excuse me, I have a question on this while you're still on the screen. It says the creation date is today, but it says last modified is also today. So, but when you opened up, it said that the last modified was in October.
Yes, great question. So these creation dates and last modified dates, these are the built-in columns from Laserfiche. So as far as Laserfiche is concerned, these documents were imported just now. So that's why you have a created date, last modified date that are the same. If we go back to our Windows folder, you can see the created date was all 11/2, and the last modified date was 10/27. And those are the values that we're capturing and putting into these fields here. So I can't modify, and this is a very, thank you for bringing it up, a very important distinction there, because these are the Laserfiche creation date and last modified, those are built in. We cannot change those values, but we can capture the data and put it into fields. And if I wanted to display those, I can actually change the view here and grab our original creation date and our original last modified date. And now you can see that those all reflect that 10/27/11/2. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much for that.
All right, wonderful. Okay, so like I say, this is a little bit, you're going to end up having to do some sort of user interference to get these into the final location if you want them to flow through workflow. So that's kind of the negative to import agent. Now let's go over to quick fields. And I basically have those same documents we're going to grab. And the way that I set up this quick field session, it's actually a very common type of session here. And we're using a barcode to determine when we see a new document. And then in this particular session that we've created, we're actually reading that barcode and using it to look up data out of a database. So this is going to run and pull those same 10 documents in, but we're going to see a little more information on those documents than what we were able to do with import agent. All right, now in this case, I used a QR code cover sheet for each of my documents. You can use regular barcodes or QR codes. I think the big thing with QR codes is they're just newer. You know, people are a little more excited to use those. But as far as pros and cons go, I think that for most quick field sessions, I would say that a regular barcode will do just fine. A very common thing that we will do when running conversions using quick fields is have like a master cover sheet that goes on top of, say, what's a good example? Say an HR file. We're converting HR files into Laserfiche documents. We're taking those out of a folder. You might have one barcode cover sheet for each of your employees, and then that cover sheet might have all the different information about the employee, and then each of the individual document types that you're importing might have a separate barcode cover sheet, usually broken down by a set document types that we might want to utilize. So that's a very common way that we've done this. QR codes, you can store a lot more information within a QR code than a standard barcode, but for the purposes of quick fields, I would say either one works. All right, so we can see our 10 documents that came in here. My cover sheet is just a big giant QR code. These are the same documents that we just brought in with import agent. So they're going to look the same. But you'll notice over here on my metadata area, I have a lot more information. I was able to fill out my AP invoices and bills template, capture a vendor name, the document type, invoice number, amount, date, etc. So all of this was able to be captured, all based on looking at this QR code and performing a database lookup. So I'm going to go ahead and store these documents. They're going to go right into Laserfiche. Okay, those are stored. Now, you'll notice that most of the documents, well, all of the documents except for my import agent documents have been picked up. I have a AP workflow that is monitoring these. And what it does is that actually sends these over into a departmental manager approval stage. It renames all of these documents based on that metadata that I've captured. If I open these up, I'm able to go ahead and mark these approved. And I just want to get these filed because this is going to come up in our later session with our forms. So in this particular instance, we have two different approvals. We have a departmental manager and a CFO approval. I'm going to mark all of those approved. And in our active vendors area, we only had Dawn's Lawn Care, number 913 originally. Now we have all these other vendors that were also brought in and created. The documents were filed into the invoice folder and renamed appropriately. So you can see where the ability to capture all of that extra metadata can really simplify the process and speed things along. So that is what we did here. Any questions on what we've seen here? All right.
Nope, yeah, sorry I'm late.
Yep.
Nope, we don't have any questions. The only question that came up was regarding the difference between Laserfiche Connector and Laserfiche Import Agent, but if people just check out the questions box, they can see Michael's answer to that.
Perfect. Okay. Let me go back over. Oh, it started over. I'm sorry. All right. Anyway, I didn't have anything big. Just wanted to see if there were any other questions on the capture tools. I know that I'm done a few minutes early there, so just wanted to see if there is anything people wanted to see. So we are moving on. All right. So
wait,
my next.
Hold on. Sorry, Ron. Before we move on, I did just have a question come in.
Yes.
About your last one. It says, how do you generate the barcodes that you use as cover pages?
Oh, great question. So there's actually, there's online tools. For this instance, I used I just typed in QR code generator in Google and was able to just type in the value that I wanted, and then it created a QR code that I was able to download and place in a document. Barcodes are actually a little easier. Generally, what I do when I'm creating barcodes is I will, well, I already have it downloaded, but you can get what we call the free 3 of 9 barcode font, and then you can literally type your, whatever you want into your, Windows Word document, and then you can convert that into a barcode text. So generic barcodes are, or 1D barcodes, I guess is the new term for them, are very easy to generate if you have a barcode font. And then QR codes, again, easy to generate online. I also know, Michael, forgive me, I know that didn't one of you guys create something that does QR codes?
Yes, CDI does have a custom workflow activity available to generate either 1D barcodes or QR codes as a part of a workflow. And then those barcodes or QR codes can be applied to a Word document, a PDF, or imported to the repository as just the image itself.
All right. Wonderful. I thought we had something. So, okay. Any other questions about the capture tools before we move on?
Oh, we have one more. Have you found a good solution to enforce or normalize file size / PPI post scan?
That is a good question. So actually using quick fields, you are able to do some resizing of already scanned documents. Generally, your PDFs will come in pretty nice, but yeah, if you have a couple different options with the quick fields, if it's coming in color, and so it's file size is very large, you can actually drop color out of the document. You can resize or change the DPI that is captured, so you can kind of downgrade that a little bit. But those are kind of the two big ones that we've used in the past. I know you used to be able to reprocess documents with the what was that called? But never mind, they've gotten rid of it, so it doesn't really matter. Photo docs is what I was thinking about.
Great, thank you, Ron. And I wrote down those answers and sent them directly to the people who asked the questions, so they could have them written down too.
Wonderful. Okay. All right. That looks like everything. So let's move into our workflow and forms discussion. All right, so starting with forms, a couple of things I wanted to just, kind of discuss. Forms 11 has been released. It's been out now for 9 months or so, somewhere around there. And it does have a couple of nice new features. The first one is the actual form designer itself. The form designer is much more user friendly. You can literally, drag fields and move them around right on the screen. So if you want to put fields side by side or resize them, you're able to actually do that all directly in the forms designer, which is very nice. We also have the ability to update or edit variable values. This can be, very important. If your forms runs into an issue because it wasn't able to route something properly, or a workflow that was kicked off failed due to kind of an invalid value getting sent, the administrator has the ability to update those forms variables and then hit a retry and then fix it without things just terminating. Which brings us now to the next one. Any processes that contain an issue are now suspended rather than terminated. So this is very nice. If you have used forms in the past, I'm sure that some of you have run into an issue where the process was terminated, and then you essentially have to just start the whole thing over. You have to, re-enter everything into the beginning and run through the entire process again. So this and these two options work very well together and allow you to, keep these processes moving. This is a new one. So if two or more users are actually editing a form at the same time, I don't know if this comes up a lot, but evidently it came up a lot enough that they've done this. You'll now be presented with a warning letting you know that there are unsaved changes from another user when you go to save the form. So that's a pretty cool, neat new feature there. At least lets you know that there are things going on that you might be stepping on somebody else's toes there. So along with the new form designer, I definitely wanted to highlight some of the, again, I guess I like pros and cons. Some of the benefits of the new form designer versus the classic designer. The classic designer allows you to see any uploaded image files directly on the form. The new form designer, for whatever reason, they did not include that. So any forms that are uploaded, you don't get that little image to display there. Also, with the classic designer, we're able to set up pagination that allowed you to have more of a tabbed setup. And in the new form designer, they have not implemented that yet. So that is something that hopefully will come in the near future there. But as I said, the new form designer allows you to place fields right next to each other on the canvas directly. You can drag those fields really anywhere on the canvas, resize them with a new width, new height, and really customize all that. Bulk select fields to modify common settings. This is a very nice feature of the new forms designer. So let's say you forgot to do something and you've made a bunch of copies of fields, and you need to go back and let's say select a bunch of fields and mark them read only. In the classic designer, you have to click on each field and mark that read only and then move on to the next one. With the new designer, you can actually select multiple fields at once and change that read only setting to all of them. In addition, you can also see what field rules and what lookup rules are applied to your selected fields right within the designer canvas on the new forms designer. Sorry, that was a mouthful. But that is very helpful so that you don't have to keep going back and forth between the layout design and the field rules page or the lookup rules page. That's a nice new feature as well. The new forms designer also allows you to upload images for your wallpaper background, your form body, and more. So just generally more customization in the look and feel of forms with the new form designer. But, and these are a couple of biggies, you cannot use JavaScript customizations with the new form designer. They do have that listed as coming soon. So hopefully that will not be a negative for too long. And then the other big one is that you can't collect payments with the payment gateway with the new forms designer. I'm not sure of why that is, but that is one limitation to the new designer. And so if you are collecting payments, you'll definitely want to keep that classic designer. So one thing to remember, or just to know, if you're interested in updating to Forms 11 from your current version, when you do that, all of your existing forms will stay with the classic designer, which is what they were built with, up to that point, but you will have the option to switch them to the new forms designer. If you are using JavaScript customizations or a payment gateway, I definitely would not do that. So keep in mind, you can update from the classic designer to the new designer, but you cannot go backwards. So if you do update one to the new form designer and you want to go back, you can't. So, so definitely keep that in mind. This was just a small selection of all of the different comparisons between the new and the classic designer. I do have a URL at the bottom my apologies, that outlines all of the, kind of all the features there. So that URL can be provided. We can send it over to you since it's probably not easy to read here on the screen. All right. Well, moving on. Forms and workflow working together. So, a lot of times we will have clients that will create a forms process, or they want to convert a workflow process into a forms process. a lot of times they don't realize that you can kind of go back and forth between forms and workflow or back. So it's very nice. A lot of cool things that you can do if you utilize both forms and workflow. Each of these business process tools have strengths and weaknesses. So if you run into an issue that you can't solve in forms directly, kick that over to a workflow, and a lot of times you can perform whatever actions you need there within workflow, and then you can kick it back into forms from there. So forms can start workflows directly. I've mentioned that a couple times as we've gone through here. So that is an activity that's built into the forms designer when you are setting it up. Also, as I said, workflow can modify field values in a forms process. So you can pass a form data over to workflow. Workflow can do what it needs to do and can kick back updated values and basically change those fields within your forms process. In addition to forms being able to start workflows, you can actually have workflow start a forms process. So this is something that we've actually done quite often. A good example of this might be if you have public-facing forms. A lot of times we tend to set those up as more of a, the outside user submits the form and it's just, brought in and stored to Laserfiche. But if you want to also have kind of a bunch of processes, running internally on your forms, you can have workflow then kick off a different forms process and pass all that information over to the new forms process, and then you can run through, through that process on your internal forms server. All right, so I do have a couple of demos here that we want to run through, so I'm going to switch back over to my VM. All right. So the first one I want to run through here. My apologies, I should have had this up already. All right, so I'll have those ready to go. And of course, my VM decides to, take a little bit to wake up here, but we'll get going. So we have a couple of different forms that I've set up here. They'll load here in a moment. And the first one is just an example of like a time off request. And we're going to submit that and walk through that process. And we have this passing information from workflow or from forms over to workflow and back. All right. So this is an example of a time off request. I have the date is captured automatically once this form is submitted. We have our employee names here and some different data that is captured when we pick, who is submitting this form. Obviously, in the real world, you would probably want that employee name to just be automatically filled in and be read-only so that we don't have somebody submitting PTO for somebody else. But anyway, we're using a database lookup to fill in this different data, including how much vacation and sick time they have available. So then we have supervisor, start date. We'll just do a couple of things here. And let's go with 3.75 since we're at 33.75. And then we'll just kind of round everything up there. So we'll take 4 hours off on that day. If you want, you can supply multiple days here, and this will update update the total time off requested as we add that in there. All right, so once that is sent through, we have a supervisor approval where, obviously we could set that up to send this to whichever supervisor you've picked in your drop-down list, or again, you could have that automatically filled in based on some sort of database lookup and the user that is submitting. So the supervisor would come out here, take a look at the submission. And again, hopefully for all of you that do have forms, you have it on a nice fast server so we don't have to wait for things to wake up here and load. Normally it doesn't take this long. Just one moment. There we go. Sometimes just needs to be jogged a little bit. All right, so the supervisor here has the ability to put in a comment. They can approve or reject. I'm sure you've all seen this before with other different forms demos. We'll go ahead and approve this. And at this point, what I am telling the system to do is, that's been approved. It needs to go to HR for kind of the final, update. And in between there, we have a workflow that is running that is looking to see, basically it's updating that time off. How much is remaining, how much is left. Let's see what is taking so long here. I guess my forms just doesn't want to wake up here today. All right, I promise this will show up here in a moment. There it is. Okay. Now, for this particular demo, there are probably other ways that I could have done this, but this was more to just, show what we can do between workflow and forms. So I might have just used some additional calculations to figure this out directly within forms, but this, what we did here, while we're waiting for that to load, I can actually show you that workflow. Just asking too much of the VM today. So basically what we're doing here is I'm grabbing the information from forms, and then I am looking at some hidden fields that you didn't see there that just says, you know, time remaining from your sick time and from vacation. We're basically, you know, taking how much you had, subtracting what you're requesting, and then creating some tokens there. And we're sending that back into forms as, you know, some additional information. So here's the HR view. They're able to see, you know, everything that everybody else was able to see. But then in addition here, we have time remaining from vacation after request. And you can see we had, you know, 33.75. Now we have 30. Time remaining 8 from 8.25. And then when I hit approve, that tells the next workflow, all right, this has been approved. We need to update that database table so that, you know, we always have the proper information showing up in forms there. And we'll wait for that to run. But basically, again, this is grabbing that information from the form, doing those calculations and updating that database table. Okay, that's happened. So if we come back over here and I pick my same user, we should now have the updated value in our current vacation and sick time available. All right, so that's just an example of you know, workflow and forms working together to go back and forth between the two systems there. And if you want to see what this looks like in the forms designer, I'll show you that here quick. I do apologize about the slowness. This was running better the other day. All right, while we're waiting for that, I'm going to open up one other workflow here that I wanted to show you. Guess I'm just asking too much of this today. Any questions about what I've shown so far while we're waiting for everything to?
Nope, I'm not getting any questions.
All right. There we go. At least we got that to work. Okay. So I'll go over this here in a moment. That's going to be my next thing. Maybe we'll switch to that and hope that this figures it out here. All right. Well, we'll just go over here. So what I have here is a workflow that, you know, generally what we'd probably do is have this run on like a monthly basis. In this particular example, set on a schedule. In this case, I'm going to run it manually. But basically, what this does is it goes to see what invoices have been received this month. So it goes out, performs a search, grabs that information, pulls the metadata information off of that, and then starts a forms process. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to let that run, especially with how slow my forms has been reacting today. So this will go and do its thing, and then we'll be able to see our form, hopefully, in the inbox. Might have to restart some services here or something. Maybe I'll close out of quick fields. I know that can take up a lot of. Oh, great. All right. Maybe it was just a log out issue. I'd be very disappointed if I'm not able to get this working here. All right, that's a good sign. So the workflow is going to do its thing here in just a moment. For those of you that might be network administrators or IT people, this is why we don't put SQL Server on the same machine as all of your other Laserfiche components. You definitely want to keep that on its own. There we go. All right. It's a little bit happier now. Okay, so we'll let that do its thing. Going back to the time off request, this is a pretty simple process here. You'll see that it'll have a start, it's assigned a supervisor, and then we have some decision points in there. There we go. All right, so like I said, this is pretty simple. We go to our supervisor who can, accept or reject. We run our check available time workflow. One thing to keep in mind in a process like this, if you are sending information over to workflow and you need that response back, you definitely want to check this box here to wait for the workflow to finish before it moves on. This does two things for you. Obviously, it waits until you have that updated data before it sends it to the next person. But in addition, if this workflow has any issues, the process will suspend then, and you'll be able to retry that or restart it. Then we go to our HR person who can accept or reject. And obviously in a real world, if you're rejecting, you would probably send some sort of email letting people know why. If you've accepted that, then we run our process that adjusts that time off. So pretty simple here. All right, let's see if my inbox is updated with our process. So this is invoked from workflow. So you can see here that our workflow started this task. And basically, this is just an invoice review. So here are all the invoices you've received this month. Probably in a real world, you would do that, once a week or once a day. Fills in the different information about the invoice number, invoice date, invoice
Ron,
amount.
I have a question. Sorry
Yes.
to interrupt. So I have a question, and it's, can the workflow return variable values to the forms process directly?
Yes. Yes. So, in this instance, what we did here, we actually pushed this information into the form. And then I actually have a separate database lookup that is looking at that vendor number and just pulling in the vendor name based on the vendor number here. So you can actually tell, tell workflow, grab all this information and pass it over to forms to start. Another thing to look at there is when I kicked off the forms process from workflow, I can actually say that the person who invoked it was, in this case, forms. So even though it was a workflow start event, and by default that would probably come up with the workflow user, I could actually say that a specific user was the person who invoked this. That can come in handy again, like I said, when you are going from one forms process and then to workflow and then to another forms process. You can keep that same person that started the process kind of flowing through there.
Can you back up for just a second? This window right here that we're looking at isn't familiar to me, and I'm a user of forms, so I'm guessing it might not be familiar to others. So can you back up and show us how you got to this window here?
This screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is just simply an assigned task. So when our workflow ran, it started a brand new process that passed that invoice data over to forms, and then in my process diagram, we'll go back to our other one here. Maybe.
Uh-oh, did I break it?
It's a learning experience. I think next time I will make sure I have multiple tabs open with all these different things. All right, well, I'll show you that.
Okay, yeah, you can move on, sorry.
But basically what happens is in this process that's invoked, we have the start, and that's what workflow is starting it, and then you have to assign it to a user. So it ends up in the inbox, and this is just the view that of this form that shows up in my inbox. So it should be fairly similar to anything that you've seen. Probably the biggest thing, I don't know, maybe I didn't have the action history open over on the side.
I think for me, I don't know about other people, but I do forms, but we haven't yet had forms where we have user tasks assigned. So I haven't done forms this complicated yet. So
got it. Yes. Yes, over here it will tell you, like who has the form. So in this case, it says forms is in process with this task. This was assigned to forms on this date and time. So there's a lot of information here. And if you, in fact, I can go back and look at the time off request also had this information. So you could see that, this user submitted a time off request. It was assigned to the supervisor on this date and time. The supervisor approved or rejected at this date and time. This keeps track of everything that takes place, throughout that form process. And then there's also a summary page that just, gives you some very summarized information there. All right.
We've got another question here, and it says, can workflow status be captured and sent back to forms? Or maybe there's another token that could be used to report to forms that a workflow is terminated?
Yes, actually, that is a great question. Obviously I'd have to go out and somehow break it to really get that to show up. But if a form or if a workflow terminates during the process, what will happen is it will suspend out here, in forms. So your forms process will go into a suspended mode, and right in here, perfect, you'd be able to check this. So if this was suspended here, there'd actually be a little clipboard right here, and that would show the error. So you'd be able to click on that little clipboard and it would pop up and say, forms or this workflow suspended, and it will, give you some, well, it'll probably give you the big error message, in which case you probably would then go into workflow, and then you could search for that terminated workflow and see what, what was going on there. And yes, I saw that next question. Yes, it's only if the wait for workflow is selected. So if you don't tell it to wait, then forms basically it just kicks off that workflow and it continues doing its thing. So then at that point, if your workflow terminates, there's it's already past that point, so it wouldn't it wouldn't actually pop up in your error messages. And then Megan, just to kind of show you, so this is kind of the breakdown of what took place in our time off request. And this is all some information that would also show up over on this right-hand side here. It's probably not going to pop out by default because this is already completed, but here's our action history.
Got it.
So you can see, yeah, so forms did this, this was completed, and you can hit the drop down and see when it was assigned. It was completed at this time, all the way through.
Great.
All righty. So I think that was it for my demos there. Let me see if I can get back here and not have it start over. All right, well, I guess I'm not smart enough on how to, there we go. Okay. So moving on from the demo, a couple of just kind of tips and tricks, things to keep in mind when you are, building out your forms processes. Some things you can do to make your approvals more efficient. This is something that we've even done internally here. We actually have one workflow that is kicked off by different forms processes. And then once that workflow gets kicked off, what it does is it goes and says, who started me? Which forms process started me? And that tells it how to route and go through that workflow. So that can be, very efficient in that you can have one workflow that is able to, work with all, different forms there. Another biggie, and I kind of hinted at this, but I don't actually have it set up, was you can use variables to route to different approvers within your forms process. So, excuse me. So when you pick that supervisor in the time off request, that should go to that supervisor, right? And it, by using that variable or that token value, we can just say, assign this task to this person. Another thing, if you are running into issues where maybe your forms processes are stalling because somebody's on vacation or sick or just left early, whatever. So if you actually use teams within forms or groups within workflow, you can assign things to those teams or groups, and then if somebody's not available, the next person in line can just take that activity and perform what they need to do there. All right, and I mentioned this in our design, in our demo. Wait for your workflows to finish when starting them from forms. So this is just what I would consider best practice. And again, it goes back to the the questions from our participants here. It allows you to be able to retry your workflow if it runs into an error. And this, in addition to the ability to edit those variable values as an administrator, maybe your workflow terminated because it didn't have the correct variable value in forms. Somebody filled it out wrong. Users find ways of breaking stuff all the time, I've found. But this really keeps those people from having to resubmit this entire process. You can update that variable, and then you can tell the form, retry this workflow, and then it will retry it. And if it fails again, it will just suspend, it will wait. All right, and kind of wrap things up here. So things that other cities have done that we've seen. This is a good one, probably something that pops up, more and more nowadays. The need for a multilingual form. I've seen this done in a couple of different ways. Usually, the big ones usually like English, Spanish radio button, or a drop down within your form, asking the user what language they would prefer. And based on that selection, you can use either field rules in forms and literally have 2 of every field, and then say, if you pick English, then we display the English fields. If you display, or if you pick Spanish, we would display all the Spanish fields there. Another thing that you can do if you are more into the coding frame of mind, you could have JavaScript that literally goes through and just changes the labels on all your fields, from one language to another. That one's obviously a little more advanced, but it also makes the design of your form a little more streamlined. You don't have to duplicate all those different fields. So a little bit easier on the forms designer, but then you do need to know what you're doing with the JavaScript. All right, which leads us right into our using advanced CSS and JavaScript. I can't even think of all the many ways that we have cities out there using advanced CSS to do kind of crazy things with the form, as far as moving things around, or just making them look pretty. I mean, CSS is more what does it look like, and then in addition, the JavaScript capabilities. Our development team has done some great things with JavaScript and forms. We are able to do all sorts of stuff, integrate with other processes, change how the form reacts or what it's doing based on what your needs are. One way I've seen this done in the past is by default, forms only allows you to have up to 3 buttons at the bottom, approve, reject, submit. You can rename those, obviously, but I had one city that I told him they were a little crazy, but he needed like 9 different buttons there. And so he used JavaScript to create, his own buttons. And then, when they clicked on those, he had routing based on, you know, all those different things and was passed on to workflow. It was a very advanced setup that they had. Some big ones that we've seen a lot of cities doing recently, advanced contract processes. So you can, you know, utilize forms as a way of capturing your contracts and all that data that gets captured there, moving it around, creating your boilerplate, you know, documents as needed, and sending those out. HR onboarding, this is a big one, not just with cities, but with you know, a lot of our clients that we work with, and you know, not just us, but you know, any VAR out there. I know that this has been a big one. You can set up an entire onboarding process for your HR that, you know, starts from the resume and cover letter capture all the way up through, you know, date of hire or beyond, training beyond that. And then integrations with DocuSign. You can, you know, integrate with DocuSign in a number of different ways. A lot of times what we'll do, we've captured form data, you know, that is being submitted. We take that data, we run it through a workflow, and then we have an integration with DocuSign, and we can send that, you know, DocuSign document out to whoever needs to sign it with all that information filled in the appropriate locations of the document. So that's a really, that one we've done a lot with quite a few clients. And then this is one that comes up every once in a while that is actually pretty cool. You can embed your web link or web client screens into a forms process. So we've had a few clients that have done this where we're submitting a lot of times it comes back to that contract process. So we are, you know, doing like a contract review maybe, where you want to be able to display all those different documents that have been captured for the contract, you know, data capture period. You can just display that contract folder within Laserfiche directly from forms. All right. And I'm done a little early, my apologies, but that brings us to our any questions. And it does look like I saw a couple.
It looks like we have a few. How about integration with Adobe Sign? There's a couple of people who are wondering about that.
Yes, there is an integration with Adobe Sign. That is actually Laserfiche's integration directly. Correct me if I misspeak, Michael or Julio. But yeah, there is an integration with Adobe Sign. I have not had a chance to play with it yet myself, but I know that that is something new that they have come out with.
The other question is do you know, like, would every person using the form need an Adobe Sign license or an Adobe Pro license? I'm going to guess that anyone who's actually using the signing feature would need it.
Yeah, for Adobe Sign, I'm not positive on the licensing requirements there. I know for our DocuSign integration, you know, you would need a license in forms to you know, to get into forms and do what you need there. But on the DocuSign side of things, generally that is just one, you know, it's under the administrative process of your Adobe or DocuSign setup. You do need to have the connect feature enabled. That is what our system uses there. And then one thing, if you want to see that Adobe Sign integration in action, we actually do have a YouTube video demo of that. So that is something that we could put out here, and we'll get a link to that posted out here for you.
Yeah, I think Kyle will send a link out in a second because he just mentioned that. Also, so did you answer the thing? Did you answer if in terms of DocuSign, like for DocuSign integration, would everyone who is part of the forms process need to have a DocuSign account?
No. So the way the DocuSign accounts work, at least from what I've experienced in the past, is that we actually only need one account that we use. So usually that is either like an account specifically set up for, like Laserfiche to use, or usually what we do is we log in with, the DocuSign, that organization's DocuSign administrator. And then as long as you have the connect feature, so that's something that there's different licensing models from DocuSign. You need to have the one that allows you to use the connect feature. But that is what we would then set up, and then it can use their credentials. Now, obviously, the big thing about using an admin's credentials is when they change those credentials, the workflow might break. So that's usually where we would say you probably want a login for that service account to use, but otherwise, yeah, you only need the one. And then
That's
on
great.
the forms side of things, like I said, you need to have a license to use forms, or you need to have the public forms add-on, which allows you to receive what we call anonymous form submissions. So basically, available to the public there.
Great, thank you.
All right. Any other questions on that?
Also, I just want to mention that we've been sharing a bunch of different links in the chat. So if you haven't had a chance to look at the chat, then feel free to check that out. We've got some links to Adobe Sign integration, as well as a CDI Adobe Sign blog post, and a few other things. So again, you just have to go to the bottom of your little pop-out screen to the chat. But I'm not seeing any other questions come through right now.
Okay. Well, my apologies. I must have spoke a little fast as I was going through there. But anyway, if you do think of any questions, definitely feel free to ask those. I will be here for the duration, so I'll try to keep an eye on those. And thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And I guess I will turn it back over to Julio.
Yes. Okay. Well, next on the agenda will be a break, and we are a little bit early. I'm not sure of how all the organizers feel if we give all the attendees a little extra break time, or if we want to cut it a little short to go into the next presentation.
I also had another idea. Maybe we could take our break early, and while we're taking our allotted break, people could ask any questions that they may have, and then we could maybe use some of that extra time to answer any questions.
Absolutely.
Just a thought to be able to ask some questions while it's on people's minds right now.
Yeah, that'd be great. So we can, in theory, take our break right now. If anyone wants to ask any questions while waiting, we'll be around to answer any questions. But I guess we can regroup again at let's see, 10:45, and we can probably have Kyle start his presentation. If that sounds good with everyone.
Sounds good.
All right, perfect.
Thank you.
All right, so if you guys need to get a drink of water or walk the dog, or whatever you need to do, this is your time to do it. We'll regroup at 10:45. Okay, I think that was 10 minutes. feel like give some people another minute to regroup before we get started to the next presentation. Does anyone have any questions before we get started with our next presentation? Okay, I don't see any questions coming in, so I think it's safe to say we can move on to the next presentation. Hey Kyle, are you back with us?
Sorry, I was muted there. Yes, I am.
Okay, perfect. I thought I lost you for a second. All right, well, I don't see any questions coming in, so I think we can move on to your presentation. I think I waited 10 minutes. I'm sure that was 10 minutes before our break. Hope I didn't cut it short. But let me pass on the presentation or the screen share to you.
All right. There we go. So thank you, Julio, for the introduction, and we are now ready to take a look at Laserfiche Records Management, a few topics that we wanted to present to you here today and get that covered. So records management in Laserfiche is an add-on component. For those of you who have already used Laserfiche and purchased records management, you know what it is. You've seen it to a certain degree. Those who have never seen it before, you'll get to see what it looks like here today. It is an add-on component, like I mentioned. Go see your VAR and get that pricing. I honestly don't know what it is, but it adds some really great functionality. The functionality that you do get with records management, if one is in need of it, it allows you to manage documents in the Laserfiche repository with a much more formal process, right? Because normally you'll have documents in the system and you can either delete them or just, you know, they're live and always there in the system. But there's really no time limit to keeping those documents. With records management, you can add a limit to how long those documents are kept in the system. You can keep them in a locked read-only state for a certain amount of time, and then as records managers, those people who are responsible for managing the documents in Laserfiche that are under records management, those documents, we call them, quote, records, that records manager person would then, at the end of the retention of those documents, come in and do that. So yes, there's no slide that's changing at the moment. So my name, again, just to introduce the topic, is Kyle Nebel. I've been here for quite a few years, and many of your names are familiar to me here today. So the records system is, you know, built in and, you know, something that, well, when you add it to that, you can do lots of formal management. Now here today, what I'd like to cover are some best practices when you are using Laserfiche records management, regardless of the methods you're using. And in version 10.4, which was about 2 years ago, Laserfiche introduced a fantastic new capability, what they call flexible records management. For those with records management systems that have been in place for many, many years, you have been dealing with a record series structure, and we'll show you that today and take a look at it in my system for demonstration purposes. But you now don't need a record series if you don't want. We'll cover all those kind of fine details there. And then we'll discuss the differences, the pros and cons between using a record series or using their Laserfiche's new flexible records management, and even the concept of what Laserfiche uses is an acronym TRM, which stands for Transparent Records Management. When you're dealing with a record series, sometimes you don't want to have your users looking at that record series. And so we'll take a look at that. And we'll do some demonstrations of taking the flexible records management to the next level using some workflows. And we'll dive into all that. All right. So some best practices in my experience is to, if you have a record series, and we'll take a look at a record series in Laserfiche shortly. There are potentially a top-level record series and then some record series below that. And then there could be a record folder, not a record series, but a record folder at that level, or another child record series. But at that record series level, the lowest level child record series, there should be a cutoff instruction and a retention schedule assigned to that. If you don't have that, then any records folders and the documents that you put in there will not have their cutoff instructions and retention schedules. So you will not be able to take records management actions on them, and you won't be able to destroy them because they have no timings, so to speak. Now, once you've done that, you can retroactively add, if you haven't done that yet, you can retroactively go to that record series child level and set the cutoff instructions and retention schedule. And then the timing could kick off right then and there and even catch up to the past. So maybe even your documents are a few years old that are in that record series, and you could then cut them off because they've already kind of fell within that time frame, and now they might be within the retention schedule, or depending on how long you're keeping them, maybe it's only a year, they might now, because you just cut them off, they're now available for disposition, whether it be destruction or accessioning. So we'll take a look at that here today. And for those records that have reached disposition time, the retention schedule has been met, and you're going to get rid of those records. Well, one, it's not an automated task, so a records manager will typically want to search for records that are ready for disposition. And that could be done by just running a saved search. You might create a search using the records management search criteria for records or records folders ready for disposition. And you can choose the disposition type. It might be destroy or it might be accessioning. By the way, little sidebar, accessioning is a concept where we make a copy of the contents that's in the Laserfiche repository onto a thumb drive or a hard drive. And then once that's copied on there and you've confirmed that it actually is copied onto the hard drive, and it usually takes the form of a briefcase, a Laserfiche briefcase that has all the documents, their metadata, and it's stored in that file. When you confirm that it's been copied to that portable media, then it's destroyed in the Laserfiche system. So it's a lot like destruction, but you made a copy of it before you destroyed it. The destroy option, when you are disposing of records, that's just for those records at least, it's a destruction, or in other words, a deletion, but it doesn't go to the recycle bin. It immediately is removed from the system. So there's, in both cases, both accessioning and destruction, the content is removed from the repository. It's just that in an accession, you've got a copy of it to be stored off-site by a third party on your behalf. And then you can re-import that content back into your system or any other Laserfiche system as you see fit. So a records manager, sidebar done, will need to take this action on a regular basis. So you might have content that you deal with every year. You might have content that you have, maybe there's just an event date that always happens, and then there's different times in the year that you want to take a look at it. So you can set yourself just reminders to go and run these saved searches. And if you're using the Laserfiche web client, Laserfiche has some pre-built searches. If you're using the Windows desktop client, you can create your own saved searches for records management. Or you can rebuild them every time, but I wouldn't recommend doing that. We're going to take a look at that here today. So what is new as of Laserfiche 10.4? So Laserfiche came out with what they called flexible records management. In other words, you don't need a record series. You can apply records properties to a document or a folder individually, no matter where it is in the repository. Pretty cool. Does that have an effect? Yes. Will it impact certain people? Yes. Does it listen to the security that that folder already has? Yes. So if you can't see the content in that folder, even if it's a record or not, you still can't see it. If you have access to that folder or that content is within a folder, you'll see it. The records management functions can be limited to just the records manager. You can expose certain functionality of records management, like setting an event date through the records management tools to end users, or we can do other tricks like using Laserfiche workflow if we don't want to train users on how to use the records functionality to set event dates or things like that. So we'll talk about that, and we'll show you here in my examples in a little bit. The other new feature as of 10.4, actually 10.4.1, was they added records management workflow activities. And it's a really powerful feature. So if we go into records management, flexible records management, like I just said, we can add cutoff and records retention policies to an individual entry. And it doesn't have to be in a record series, it could be anywhere. You don't even have to have record series now. Now, there is some gotchas or caveats I want to mention. So when you are assigning cutoff and retention rules to a document, that document automatically becomes a record and will follow records management rules. And assigning them records properties like retention and cutoff to a folder will make that folder a record folder. And all documents within that folder and any subfolder are also going to become records. So if you assign that records retention and cutoff on a folder, the contents within that folder will inherit that information automatically, and any new documents you put in that folder will also inherit that property, much like it does in a record series. So it's just that you don't need a record series. Now, there is a potential where some environments, due to compliance needs, you're required to keep your records in a record series. You can actually switch that, you can disable this flexible records management in the repository options in the admin console side of things, so that it forces record series functionality and you can't do any additional flexible records management. So you can do that. So that's really a nice feature for those who need it. You'll know because you've got that. All right, records management workflow activities. It's one activity, but you can choose several different functions from it. We can set properties like event dates, cutoffs, retention schedules. We can, and other functionality as well. The only thing that the records management properties activity does not allow you to do is a couple things. One, we cannot create records retention schedules, cutoff instructions, or record series from that activity, but we can assign properties to a record in a repository, and we can do several other activities. I'll show you exactly what that is. So you would take that one activity, choose the function that's in there, and then if you had to do another activity, you'd have to add it again and do that, okay? In addition to those two features, they have renamed the formerly referred to as freeze, now called hold. I always thought it was hold anyway, but Laserfiche called it freezes. They're now called holds because it would be, for example, a legal hold, right? You don't want to destroy or get rid of any content because there's some kind of litigation going on, some kind of need to maintain and retain those records, even though it's outside of its life cycle. And they can be assigned to any entry, whether it's a record, and assigning a hold, and it doesn't even have to be a record. You could put a hold, if you have records management edition, that would be the prerequisite, but you could put a hold on a document or a folder that's not a record, and it does not make it a record if it is assigned a hold. You can use that basically as a search, if you want to think of it that way, when you are doing things like putting a hold on a non-record type entry. But most of the time, you're probably going to be assigning holds on some kind of records. Okay. Now, a user, when they create a hold, you can create the name of the hold and also assign a due date. And then you can search for those holds based on that name. Or the due date. So it's a kind of a flexible system. So we can allow users to create the hold themselves, give that name. So every hold has its own name when you create it, and then optionally you can assign a due date. Okay. So that would make it searchable later on. All right. So with the new features in place, what about those who already have had record series in place and you've implemented transparent records management? For those who are new to records management or new to Laserfiche, there's always been an issue with the record series construct. And the design of a record series sometimes just doesn't match the real world, and you'd want a regular folder structure for your end users to view content that was stored in the record series. And so what developed was a concept where we would use Laserfiche's workflow engine to allow a user to put a document into Laserfiche, maybe in an incoming scans folder, and assign some metadata, which would then allow the workflow to move it to the record series, assign some
I'm sorry,
Yep.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. We have a question that we're not sure how to answer, so I'm hoping you can. The question is, can you set a hold based on a keyword?
You know what? We'll take a look at the workflow and see if we can set a hold on and apply a hold. If that was the case, then we could do, if it's metadata, we could do that. But yeah, I was trying to figure out what that question was. I thought the workflow, the hold name might be the keyword. But if you're thinking you want to use a workflow to trigger the hold, let's take a look and see. We'll take a look at a workflow and see what that tool provides. Yeah. So if you're using transparent records management, you've got this workflow in place so that all your documents are stored. The original is stored in the record series. The workflow would create a shortcut in a normal folder structure. Maybe you're storing your records your records in a folder by year, but that's not how everybody else looks at it. They look at it by maybe contract name or employee name, and they don't care about the year, but they want to see the content in their folder structure that they're used to dealing with. We would build a workflow to copy or make a shortcut to the record in the record series and put it in the regular folder. So you're pointing back to the content under records management, but there'd be a shortcut. And that's what Laserfiche calls transparent records management. I'll show you an example of that here in a moment. Now the question is, with the new edition, do you need to switch to flexible records management? No, you can continue doing everything you've been doing from now on. And as I mentioned, you can even disable the flexible records management where appropriate. Now, is it appropriate to switch to flexible records management from a TRM system? If it's easier for everything to be in a record, a normal record structure, a normal folder structure, and not require your record series, you could, day forward, switch to that kind of mode. and apply records properties to your documents as they live in your records, your regular folder structure. It's a lot of work sometimes, so you're going to have to balance how much work it is to convert from that method to your out of the kind of day forward flexible records management. And then can workflow help? Well, that's kind of a leading question, I think. Yes, we would definitely want to use workflow to move content out of those records series and into the regulars folders, because it does now have records properties. We can make sure that those records properties are assigned to the individual content, even though it's now maybe going to be moved out of its record series. But that sounds, sometimes, depending on how much content we're dealing with and how many different record series, it could be a major project. So one also has to balance the effort required. Sometimes you've got entropy and basically you should just stay with the records series and transparent records management mode as opposed to going to flexible. Or maybe it's implemented for one department and you're thinking, well, I've got another department coming on board. Maybe we'll go to the flexible records management for them. So sometimes you can do that. All right. Okay. Some pros and cons of record series versus records folders. Within a record series, one has records folders. You've probably seen that. And a records folder contains the records, in other words, the documents that you can manage. So as a records manager and a best practice, you would typically be, at least in prior systems, prior to 10.4, your records properties would be in, well, your records would be in a records folder, and you would manage the folder. For example, you'd set the cutoff on the folder, which would then cut off all the documents inside that folder, that records folder. And then you destroy that or accession that folder and all the content therein. That's Laserfiche's best practice. But now, what if you've switched to this flexible records management idea? Do you have a records folder? Yeah, you can do that. You can assign records properties, like mentioned, on a folder, which then sets the records properties on the content within that folder. So you can still manage, using best practices, a records folder, but now you don't have to worry about a record series. And for some, do we want to manage maybe the life cycle up to at least prior to destruction or disposition? Do we want to manage maybe event dates based on metadata? Yeah, we can create a field and build a workflow to, for example, cut off a document because we have a field where that event date is now available to everybody. They don't have to learn records management. They can just assign a event date on a field, and then the content can then, we can use a workflow to assign the records properties. All right. And as we go along, so when you're managing record series versus records folders and flexible records management, the searches for all the content by cutoff instruction or ready for cutoff or ready for disposition are still available no matter where the content is. But this, depending on what you're searching for, you might not have to be a records manager to see that content, or it's just security still applies to record series as it does to regular folders. So security may be an issue by setting, permissions on record series or the regular folders. TRM actually kind of uses a interesting concept where you can't see, as an end user, one cannot see the record series, but when you double click on a shortcut, you get access to the document, and that's done through some security settings on those record series. All right. And so before I get into our demonstration and hands-on here, to learn more about any of this, reach out to your VAR for training and consulting. We here at CDI have done quite a number of these implementations and have some pretty good experience. I think that, take advantage of the knowledge that your VAR has. Now, Laserfiche has a learning system. They call it Aspire. It's part of their support system. Now, some of that is free, some of that is paid. So depending on what kind of content you're going to try and use for learning, there are some paid courses. There are some free tutorials in the Laserfiche support site, which is free. Just sign up on their support site. And you just need your Laserfiche serial number, your company email, and company name, and you can get that account. Now, Aspire is a slightly different concept there. Now, within the support site, Laserfiche also has an answers forum where you can post questions and get answers by not only Laserfiche, but other VARs and other Laserfiche end users. So it's really great there. And hopefully you've made contacts here today, and if not, maybe if you want to reach out to us, we can provide connections to other cities, and you can talk about what you might have done and or ask what they have done to find out more about implementing records management. All right. So there we go. So let's take a look at some examples and a demonstration of records management in there. Oops, we'll skip that for now. Okay, so let me switch gears here. We'll minimize that, and we'll take a look at a system that is set up with records management record series, and many of you have seen this before. So here's a repository. We've got a top-level records management record series. Now, you could have, I've seen some cities create individual department areas, or you could, create a record series, child record series for each department under a single top-level record series. And that record series does have to begin at the very top root level of the repository. You can't put it under, you can't start a record series in some other folder. It has to actually start up at the root. So that's why we see it right here at the very root level. I've called this one records management with a code of 00. In fact, if we right click on that record series, we can look at the records properties. By the way, you can add icons to your toolbar that do the same thing. You can do records management actions and records properties. So I'll click on that records properties button that I've customized on my toolbar. You can do the same. How do you do that? Just right click anywhere on the toolbar, hit customize, go to commands, and under the records options, you have your activities for records right there. Let's add hold actions. And you just drag the icon up onto the toolbar, release it, and that has been now added to your toolbar.
How can you maximize that Laserfiche, the repository screen? Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So with the icons added to the toolbar, you can now just click on the toolbar icon instead of having to right click, because the records management actions button, if you look at it here, it's not a right click option. You end up having to click on either records and then the records management action or run the button. But here, let's take a look at the properties like I was going to do here. So let's look at this top level, and you'll notice it has no cutoff instructions, and that's okay. It doesn't have to. Like I said, the very bottom level child records series, that one should have cutoff instructions and retention. Okay, so even on this, for for example, this core record child has no properties on it. But if we get deeper in, we'll find that, for example, we'll look at contracts and agreements, and we'll still see that it's really not there. But then if we look at one of the child, very far bottom level ones, we have cutoff instructions and retention schedules. You even have a disposition authority number. So that's always going to be assigned at the record series or records folder level. I'll come back to it, but just as a sidebar, if you are not using record series and you're using Laserfiche's new what they call flexible records management, you can put the disposition authority number on the records folder, which then the records, or in other words, the documents in that records folder will inherit. You cannot assign a disposition authority number directly on a document itself. So for example, this record here is in this contracts. Let me expand this out. And for those who find this, this is small text for me as well. I'm going to go to my options settings, go to my browser, and I'm going to change the custom font, and we're going to make it a bit larger. Click OK. So at least you can see the text there. It's just, yeah, Laserfiche's fonts are sometimes a bit too small for everything. So if you need to do that, you can always, and this is per user, so every user who updates their font size, you can certainly get that. Okay, so if we look at this record contract here, records properties, there's a disposition authority number on there. If we look at the document within it, or in other words, the quote record, and we look at the properties, we could change the individual records cutoff instructions and whatnot, but notice the disposition authority is not editable. It's kind of in a gray box there instead of being fully editable because it's inheriting properties from its parent. Okay. So if you needed to put a DAN number on a document that wasn't in a records folder, you just couldn't do it. But because we're in a record series, it just kind of flows through that way. So transparent records management, what does that look like? So we've got a document in, or in other words, a record in this folder here. But TRM also means there would be, for example, a different folder structure. For example, I've got this Cities Digital folder, a TRM shortcut folder, and there's the shortcut pointing back to the document that's living in that very interesting and not quite logical record series that, at least for me, works. Okay, so transparent record management tries to take out the records management side of things and just make life easy for us as end users so that we don't have to look in a weird structure. We just live in our normal folder structure. Okay, and an end user might not even see this entire record series, but when they double click on the shortcut, it would open up that record in their document viewer. All right, so that's transparent records management using record series. If you wanted to go to flexible records management, we can, you can take a regular folder, you can go into the records properties, and you can assign any, let's choose asset no longer owned, and we'll choose destroy after 60 days. And click OK. Now, did you see what happened? That folder now has records properties and the icon changed. So that's flexible records management for you. You can apply records properties on a folder. You can even, I'm going to right click and choose records properties and remove that. I'll change it back. So if it's not cut off, and as a records manager, you'd be managing this. When you change both of those properties and remove them, basically, it says you're removing these. Do you want to unset all the properties on this entry. We'll say yes, and it reverts back to a regular folder.
Kyle, I just have to say this is so cool. So are you saying that we can right click on that folder and apply records properties, and that's to any folder that is not part of the records, the records management folders, correct?
That's with the new version of since 10.4, correct, yeah.
I just wanna take a moment to say how cool that is. The laser nerd that I am.
Yes, thank you, Laserfiche. So let's do that again. And notice there is a document in here. Let's look and see, is there any records properties on it? Nope. So let's go and apply records properties to the folder. We'll just pick whatever it is. Doesn't really matter. We can even type in, I don't know, not that the disposition authority number is test, but we'll put that on there. And now we'll click OK. So now, if we look at the properties on the document, look at that. The document, sample 111, has those same properties and the DAN number on there. So it works in very similar fashion, but it's not constrained to a record series. So that's the new flexible records management. Do you have to put a folder on, on that content? Let's remove the content on that folder. Say none. Okay. All right. Let me just. Okay. So here's an interesting artifact. The folder pane does not automatically refresh. So if you're in the folder pane, just hit F5 on your keyboard or close F5, and that sometimes doesn't update. But if you notice, you're still fine, right? Let's see, regular folder. Oh, was I not? Let's double check that, make sure I did that right. Let's go hit none. I must have not said, okay, there we go. If you see this message, then you know you're actually taking action. I didn't see that message, so I must have missed one of them. Go ahead and click yes. That reverts the folder. Let's see if the content therein, which might have had it, it now reverts the properties on the content in that folder as well.
Are we able to set record properties directly on the document?
We can set records properties directly on the document, except for the disposition authority number. Yeah, good question. Yeah, I was going to go and do that. We can do it on the record itself. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll do case closed, and we'll retain our accession after 90 days. Click OK. So now this document, or in other words, record, has records properties, and now you can take a records action on it. If you're a records manager, you might have access to the records choices. If you're not a records manager and you do want to assign an event date, there is security, which allows us, let me just pick a user here. Let's say we'll use our demo account. And under records management, there's some options here. Now we can add a hold and set last review date. But I think records managers would only be allowed to set the event time and or close/reopen a folder. Closing a folder it's not cutting it off, it's kind of pseudo cutting off. You do that in advance of the actual cutoff, just to kind of give users a warning that the content's going to be locked down, but it's not a real cutoff. But setting the event time, well, if you don't have rights to set the event time, but you need your users to do that, how do you go about effectively letting users set an event time on a document when they're not records managers? There is that possibility. We just need to use the Laserfiche workflow set records properties activity that is now available. So we use workflow to do that instead of something else. And that'll, we'll take a look at that. Plus we'll take a look at how we might assign hold based on a keyword, which was a previous question. So kind of be neat to see both of those here. in action. So as you can see, a records manager might need to be setting event times, but if you're an end user and you're in a regular folder structure and you want to set that on the folder or the document in order to cut the document off, because that's part of your job, but you're not a records manager, how do we get that to happen? Well, we use workflow to do that, and we can take a look at that. In fact, I'd like to demo that really quickly here. And I've shown several cities this and other clients, and we're implementing this because 10.4 allows us to do that. We're implementing it more and more often. Let's take an example of a new document. I'm just going to create a dummy document here. However, I'm going to assign a records management template. And I've come up with an idea that I'm sure is being used in different places. You could set your cutoff instructions and retention, but I've come up with a dynamic field configuration where we use a database, and we can choose a record type from a list, and that's in the database tied to lots of information, mostly the retention schedule, cutoff instructions, and possibly even the DAN number and things like that. But notice we also have an event date field so that the end user can fill in the date when this event occurs, right? In this case, we've got a contract where the transaction is completed or the coverage has expired. We want to set that event date. So we'll click OK. Obviously, this is just something we want to go in here. We'll click OK. All right, so that document went in and automatically filed. So let's go see where it went. It went into our flexible records area. It got filed in here, and we can see, let's see if there's any records properties. Well, you know what? I should have showed you that there's nothing in that folder before I did that. So let's do this. Let's delete that document just to even prove there's no real smoke and mirrors. So under flexible records, there's no content. There's our regular folder. So under flexible records, we'll see that document go in there again. So let's do that again. We'll bring in our document, whatever it may be. We'll assign the template, choose our record type, which ties to a very specific DAN cutoff instruction and retention schedule. We'll click OK. There's the document in the repository, and it routes out. We'll go to flexible records, and there is that document renamed with its date and time, and it now has our document properties, our record properties, because of that same match. It's record, the workflow, the activity said, oh, let me assign that to it. And then as a records manager, you could, as a records manager, you can set the event date. Either one of these is, not both, but anyone could set it. So you could highlight that, set the event date, choose the date, and cut it off. But you'd have to be a records manager to do that. So like I was saying, hey, what about maybe assigning the event date to a field? Well, we can set the event date on the field. Let's put it back, not sure, this is 6 years. So let's go back at least 6 years. We'll go back 7 years. So we'll go to 2013. That way we can actually, make sure that it's, well, one, it'll be cut off, but two, we can then even do a final disposition. Click OK. And if we go look at that, our dates are set. The document is, oops, I'm probably going too fast. I'm going to change my columns, and I'm going to go to my records. So this document now, even though it's not in a records folder, it's just an individual document, it now has one, it's been cut off, its retention schedule is still maintained, and if we look at the item here, we can see that it's been cut off, and its eligibility is November 2013 for cutoff, and what's its retention? Projected destruction on 2019, so 6 years. So I went back a bit too far in the years, but as you can see, it's now eligible for destruction. Okay, so it's in read-only mode until it's either destroyed or accessioned, and then it's gone. So when any record, no matter where it is or how it's managed in the records management system, if it's cut off, it is in read-only mode. All right. There is a question being posed that is, why is a folder closed when the event date is entered for a future date? It's an interesting question. I'm not sure I'm quite following that one. Closed is you can close. There's this property action you can take on documents where I think it's, well, in this case, we've already got some items. Closing is for those record series. Right, exactly. Thank you, Megan. It's just not editable, but the event date is, as you say, that really sets the cutoff, and then retentions is managed from there.
Sorry, Kyle, I didn't respond to that. I didn't send that to everyone, but so just to clarify for others, the question was, why is the folder closed when the event date is entered for a future date? And I just wanted to clarify for people, especially when thinking about this, like the equivalent of your print records, for example. So when you're talking about retention, when you close a record, the record is when you put the files in the boxes to go live out their retention in your storage room. But the event date is the date that you give those boxes to the shredder and they're destroyed. So that's kind of how I equate it in Laserfiche when thinking about things. You know, the close date is when it pops into like its actual place where it can live out its retention, and the event date is when you're ready to destroy it. So just to clarify that.
The event date also can indicate the cutoff. So as you can see in the records set, before you can cut off a record, the record's event date, whatever that event is, that must be set here as well. So you can also do that. And then having set the event date, it allows you to manually cut it off. So I just ran a workflow that cut off that document here for us. But prior to having this workflow, you had to do this manually. You had to search for all the documents that were ready for, that matched where you had to assign the event date. You then have to assign event dates on those content. And that's why you want to do it on a folder rather than every individual document, because you would have to set the event dates on every individual document in the past. And that's why a records folder is more best practice, let's put it that way. Once you set the event date, you could then cut it off. You'd hit the button to do that. Now we can now use workflow to do everything except for the disposition. You still have to manually destroy content. You have to know what you're doing. You have to have a report. Everybody's aware of what's going on, and all this. So this is all for digital content again. Now we even did we'll be doing a video, or I think we've already got one on physical records management from in Laserfiche. Basically, your documents are going to be basically representing a box out there in the physical storage facility, and you can kind of manage them here, and also at the same time have to physically walk over, and if you have to destroy the box in Laserfiche, you do that, and then you walk over and actually take the box to the shredder physically. But that's a different subject, not what I want to cover here today. So your document or your content is now cut off by that workflow, and now the timer's ticking, and now you as a records manager would have to do the actual destroy yourself with the records management action. So how did we get here? How did that happen? How did we use workflow? Let's take a look at that workflow. We'll go ahead and look at my workflow designer tool, and this one I can't change the fonts on this, so I do apologize. And on the toolbox, you will find a new option it's in my frequently used list, but it's called Set Records Management Properties. And that activity has, if you look at the properties on the right side, we can do these activities. We can set a filing date. That would be a filing date you would assign either on a document or a folder. Filing dates are useful for time-based cutoffs, not an event-based cutoff, but a time-based cutoff, something that, you know, at the end of the year, we have to cut everything off because something happened that previous year. The filing date is important in those situations. We can set an event date, we can cut off, we can uncut off, set retention schedules, we can add or remove a hold. So if you have a workflow that says, hey, search for all documents where the metadata value is hold equals yes, or maybe the field is called hold and the value is yes, we could say, well, find all documents where the field called hold content, the value is yes, and then apply a hold on that content. And if you do add a hold, you can add the reason and date. The reason, I believe, turns into the hold name. And then you can even assign optionally a date on that hold, the due date, and then you can search for those. Okay. And so that's a function in the activities. And then you also have your set retention schedule and assigned cutoff instruction actions here as well within this one activity. So if you need to do both, if you have to set a retention schedule and you'll choose it from what's in your system, you have to have it in the system here. We'll do that. And then if you wanted to assign a cutoff instruction, you would have to add this activity again, apply it to that same item, and this one is cutoff, and we can do it in reverse order, it doesn't matter, and then choose your cutoff instruction and apply it. So you need 2 steps to do that. So if you are setting a filing date, yeah, we might need to chat offline. You might have a workflow doing things. You might have, because of record series, something's getting cut off. We'll have to see what the scenario is. So there we go. So that is the workflow new activity as of 10.4.1. There was a slight delay in the workflow. So 10.4 had the capability, and then workflow caught up in the next point release in 10.4.1. So we can do a lot of really neat things with our workflow activities and the new flexible records management that we weren't able to do prior. So there you go. That is Laserfiche workflow. I'm just kind of looking at the questions over there while we go through. Let's go ahead and resume our slideshow here. And we're just about at the end. And so we have had some questions as we go along. Great, awesome, good question here. You're interested in managing physical records, but track the disposition in an external database. Yeah, you would want to set up that database. You could do it retroactively, but obviously day 4 would make more sense, right? If you haven't destroyed anything, you can set up your database as well. It sounds fairly straightforward, but depending on your sophistication, we can certainly do that, and your VAR can help out. Not sure who your VAR is, but yeah, we do use databases. And let me just go back to the demo here. Let's go ahead and show you something real quick. The workflow that sets items up, and some have lots of branches in there, but when I apply the records properties on the document and shows, well, notice now it's all item. Let me create a new document here. And let me apply that records management. So this lookup based on the record type will be in fact, we have a SQL database. We do that quite often. And you'll have just all your DAN numbers, your cutoff retention schedules. And this cutoff will need to match in the database. It'll need to match what's in your administration console as far as, for example, your retention schedules and cutoff instructions in your system. So your database has to have all these entered as well in the exact spelling as they are in the system so that we can use them. Depending on how many you have, sometimes it's a big database, sometimes it's a small database. If you want to go department by department, that sometimes makes it a lot easier to implement this flexible records management and workflow functionality. All right. So there's a good question here. When the record series is locked down, so LF admins can manage it there, but nobody else, they can't search for docs because those are shortcuts in their folders. Yeah, exactly. That's pretty typical. You could give them not rights at the top level, but rights to whichever record series or child record series made sense for that particular set of users. Give them rights to browse and read that area, and then have access to the documents. But really, they should really only need, if you set the access of documents only, so the scope, they could see everything underneath a certain level. You hide the top level, give them access rights to all just documents only as the scope, and they would search for the documents in the regular records, regular folder structure based on metadata that's on those documents. So yeah, you can still find the shortcuts basically, and then they double click the shortcut, which then takes them to the document. So I think it's just a change to the way security is set up and the scope that might help get that straightened out so that they could still just search in the normal records, normal folder structure to do that. So, yeah. All right, well, great stuff here. It looks like I am at just a few minutes shy of my hour. So keep the questions coming, I'm loving it. Let's see. And could metadata from another application be mapped to Laserfiche records retention? Yeah, it depends. Certainly if we can access it via workflow, that would be pretty straightforward and very easy. And we can apply, as I said, records properties on both documents and or folders that we found, and we can set that up with this workflow activity that I just showed you. All right. There we go. Yeah, I think I answered those questions. If I haven't, please ask it again or just make sure. But yeah, I'm going back to that physical records management question. Physical records, being outside of Laserfiche, one doesn't really know what's going on, but you can simply make for every box, you create a document in Laserfiche and put the records properties on that content there in Laserfiche, and then you manage it within Laserfiche until the point where you're like, okay, now it's stored, it's taped up, nobody can go get it, it's locked, and then if it has to be destroyed, you go walk over and take it to the shredder. So, but yeah, if you want to have a way of reporting on what that information is, a dynamic field configuration with an external database would certainly be logical and certainly something we could do. Just depends on your criteria and your features and what you need. So there you go. All right. So Julio, I'm going to pass it back to you. I just want to, again, thank everybody for your attendance and your questions. I think everybody's really excited to see that. And that does it for me. And everybody, look forward to talking with you shortly. Julio, back to you.
All right, thank you, Kyle. Pass the presentation over to me. So that wraps up our presentations, and we're gonna actually have Teresa. I know you're interested in, or you want to have time to talk about the survey. Do you want to elaborate more about what's going to happen with the survey?
Yes, we do have a networking survey that we first did it a couple years ago when we first started using the user group meetings as a way for people to get contact information. But we do have a revised survey now, and if I put the link in the chat box, and if you could fill that out by Monday, November 22nd, that would be great. And what I'll do is once we get the completed survey from everyone, I will send it out to everybody who's completed the survey. So if you want to get the results of the survey, please complete the survey. And please note that this is not the same survey we did in previous user groups. So even if you completed that survey, please fill out this one. There's a few additional questions and things have changed. So I hope you all fill out the survey. It shouldn't take you but maybe 5 minutes to fill it out. And I think it'll give you a lot of information and contact information. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Yeah, and just before we wrap up today's user group, just want to give some people some good resources if they still have questions about what we covered today. You can always contact us at CDI through our consulting's email, consultings@citiesdigital.com, and also our sales team as well at sales@citiesdigital.com. Other very useful resources are our website. We have a page dedicated to our webinars there that take you directly to our YouTube channel, and also some brochures and other useful information as well. Of course, our YouTube channel that has a large array of different videos that we've done covering several different topics of Laserfiche applications, workflows, Laserfiche forms, huge library. I encourage everyone to browse through. We have new sessions every month, and if you subscribe, you'll be up to date with everything that we've been posting. We also have answers on the Laserfiche website. Great place if you have a question, you want to submit it to the Laserfiche community. There's tons of people who are active on that board, and tons of questions asked, and more than likely, whatever you might be curious about or don't know about, someone might have had the same question, and you may find that question answered on the board. And of course, if you want further support, you can always reach out to laserfiche.com/support. And yeah, thank you. We really appreciate everyone attending today's user group. I really hope it was useful. Please fill out Teresa's survey. Once you get it, click on the link that's on the chat box, and I'll probably send out a direct link to everyone as well to make sure they have it. And at the end of this webinar, we will have another survey as well, just basic questions asking you how you felt about today's session and any kind of suggestions you have or rooms to improve our next user group. But before we finally say our farewells, is there any last minute questions anyone wants to ask? We do have one question. I think this is just a general question for anyone out there regarding if anyone's upgraded to Laserfiche 11 or Forms 11. I'm not sure if anyone wants to answer or provide insights on Laserfiche 11 or Forms 11.
This is Kyle. I'll chime in here. Many of our clients are upgrading to version 11, and all the features that I showed you in records management today here are still in version 11, of course. But Forms 11 has those great features that Ron mentioned, including the ability to edit a process that might have hung up because a variable value was incorrect, you can edit that. So all that features in there. Any kind of upgrades, one should always plan with the help of a VAR and have everything looked at. But I'd say half of our active clients are upgraded at this point, if not most of them. So, but I'll let anybody else answer on the questions area if they want.
Thanks, Kyle, for that response. Any other questions out there? All right. Well, like I said previously, earlier in today's session, this session will be recorded. Give it about a day or two for the editing process to go all the way through, and then I'll be submitting a direct link to everyone to access it on our YouTube channel. But once again, thank you. I hope this was useful, and we'll see you at the next session. Bye.